On Father's Day, I received a box with no name, no note, just small holes on the sides and something moving inside. My wife took one look at it and whispered, "Don't open it. Can't you see?" I didn't shout. I didn't panic. I walked into my office and pulled out the old camcorder I hadn't touched in years. That was the first move, because what came next wasn't a misunderstanding, it was war. Before we dive deeper, hit subscribe and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? The lake outside was still, almost unnaturally so, as if it too sensed the hollowness of this morning. I sat on the porch wrapped in a wool cardigan I didn't need, cradling my coffee like it might offer more warmth than it actually did. Father's Day. The words used to mean something. A phone call, maybe two. A crayon drawing from Gideon folded into a crooked card. A voicemail from Travis, promising they'd visit next weekend. This year, there was nothing. The sky was the soft gray blue of early summer, and the breeze off the water nudged the wind chimes gently, like it knew not to be too loud. A couple of loons floated near the reeds. Normally, I'd have smiled at that. Today, I just watched. The phone didn't ring. No ping, no buzz. Just the morning sounds that filled the air when nobody else was thinking of you. I'd stopped glancing at the screen around the second refill of coffee. Pretending it didn't matter was easier than admitting the silence had already set in. Inside, Marlene moved around the kitchen with a kind of quiet purpose, fixing eggs, toasting bread, like she always did. But she didn't ask how I'd slept, and I didn't ask if she needed help. We both knew the question that hung between us, and we both pretended not to see it. "Do you want orange juice or coffee?" she asked, not looking at me. "I already have coffee." "Oh," she said. Then nothing more. We ate in near silence. The kind where knives scrape too loud on the plate. I chewed slowly, tasting everything and nothing at once. After breakfast, I stepped out to the mailbox, even though I knew better. A part of me still hoped. There was no card, not even junk mail. Just air and dust and that old metal squeak as I closed it. Back inside, I found myself at the sideboard in the hallway, top drawer, under the flashlight and the batteries. The envelope was still there, creased, but never opened, never sent. My handwriting on the front, last year's hurt in last year's ink. I sat down and opened it. "Dear Travis," it began. "I know this probably won't come out right, and maybe it won't come out at all, but I need to try." The rest was a jumble of things I hadn't said, that I missed his voice, that I didn't understand what had changed between us, that I thought Roxanne didn't like me much and I wasn't sure why, but I was tired of guessing. That I wished they'd stop sending gift cards and just send a photo, or better yet, a conversation. I'd written the letter after they canceled last year's visit. Travis said work got busy. Roxanne sent a $50 e-gift card with the message, "Get yourself something fun. Dad." I didn't send the letter. Folded it, stuffed it into the drawer. Back then, I thought silence was the high road. Reading it now, it felt more like retreat. I stared at the paper. Maybe they thought I didn't care. Maybe they interpreted my quiet as coldness. I thought I was giving them space. Turns out space can look a lot like distance when no one builds a bridge back. Later, I wandered down the hall and paused outside Gideon's old room. The door creaked just like it used to. The room looked the same, books on the shelf, a faded baseball cap hanging on the lamp. Dust had settled in places it never used to. On the nightstand was a photo of the two of us fishing. He was 7, and his smile was missing 2 front teeth. That was the summer he asked, "Why don't you visit us more, Grandpa?" I hadn't known what to say then. I still didn't. Maybe I thought waiting for them to come to me was noble. Maybe it was just passive. My hand brushed the frame, knocking loose a flake of dust. Giving them space hadn't brought them closer, it had just made it easier for them to stay away. I walked back to the kitchen and poured the last of the coffee. Marlene was at the sink, rinsing plates we hadn't dirtied much. We didn't talk. That's when I saw the delivery van pulling into the driveway. Brown, boxy, quiet. Keegan, the delivery kid with the nose ring and nervous smile, stepped out carrying a medium-sized box. I opened the door before he could knock. "Special delivery," he said. "Sunday drop. Someone must like you." "No signature?" I asked. He shook his head. "Nope. Just says Lowell Carr. Rockport address. That's you, right?" "That's me," I said, and took the box. It wasn't heavy. Shoebox sized. No return address. No card. Nothing but the shape of cardboard and possibility. Marlene stepped into the hallway as I set the box down on the kitchen table. She looked at it, then looked at me, and her face went a shade paler than I'd seen in years. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Don't open it. Can't you see?" The box sat in my hands like a riddle, too light to be meaningful, too quiet to be ignored. I carried it into the living room, careful not to tilt or jostle it, as if instinct already knew something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. There were no markings, no logos, no cheerful stickers or "Happy Father's Day" scrawled in faux cursive font. Just brown cardboard and silence. I set it down on the coffee table, next to an old Reader's Digest and a glass coaster. My fingers hovered over the taped seam. Whoever sent it knew I'd be here, knew I'd be the one to open it. That alone sent a ripple of unease through my chest. Marlene's footsteps padded softly on the wood floor behind me. She was still holding the kitchen towel, damp and twisted in her hands. Her voice didn't rise, but it stopped me cold. "Lowell," she said, "don't open it." I looked up. Her face had drained of color. Her eyes weren't on me, they were locked on the box. "Can't you see?" "See what?" I asked, my voice lower than usual. She stepped closer and pointed. That's when I noticed them, tiny holes, barely bigger than a pencil tip, spaced evenly along one side. I hadn't noticed before, but now, under the angle of afternoon sun, they were unmistakable. "Breathing holes?" I asked, uncertain. "Looks like it," she whispered, or something pretending to be. I leaned closer, inspecting the punctures, clean, precise, not random like someone jabbing out of frustration. These were made with purpose. "It could be nothing," I said. "Or it could be something," she replied, her eyes still fixed on it. We stood there for a few seconds, not speaking, just looking. The box didn't move, didn't make a sound, but the quiet around it pressed in on us like the hush before a thunderclap. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe it's Roxanne's idea of a practical joke. Marlene didn't laugh. I sat down slowly, elbows resting on my knees, the box between us like a guest neither of us invited. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something else, something metallic, sharp, not blood, just unnerving. "Remember when she sent that self-help book last Christmas?" I asked. "How to be more emotionally available." That was a real subtle one. "Subtle like a brick," Marlene muttered. And the birthday card that said, "Thanks for teaching Travis what not to do." She called that sarcasm. I sighed. She called it love once. Marlene didn't respond. I reached for the box again, not to open it, just to feel its weight. It didn't even press back into my palm. Whatever was inside wasn't solid, or wasn't alone. Then it happened. Just as I started to lift it slightly, something shifted, a rustle. Not loud, not long, but real. I froze. Marlene gasped and stepped backward, the towel dropping to the floor. "I told you," she said, her voice sharper now. "Call someone." "Call who?" "The police, or animal control, or someone." "What am I going to say?" I asked, trying to steady my breath. "Hi. I got a box, and it moved?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. Because that's exactly what happened. We stared at each other, locked in an argument that hadn't even started yet. The box sat in the middle like it knew. "Maybe it's a toy," I offered weakly. "One of those prank things that moves when the box warms up." Marlene shook her head. "You think Roxanne would send you something playful?" I didn't answer, because we both knew the answer. I set the box down carefully, like it might explode, sat back again, watched it, waited. No sound, no movement. But the silence, it had teeth. I felt something clawing at the back of my thoughts. Was it a joke? A warning? A line crossed that couldn't be uncrossed? I thought back to every tense holiday, every forced smile, every time Travis avoided eye contact and Roxanne called me Lowell instead of Dad. I thought about the way Gideon used to squeeze my hand before his parents scooped him away like he was a prize they were reluctantly sharing. What if this wasn't a prank? What if it was how they told me I wasn't welcome anymore? What if it was the message they'd never dared to say out loud? I looked at Marlene, now standing by the wall with her arms crossed, staring at me like I was the box, and she was waiting to see what I'd do next. My voice came out softer than I intended. "I don't think this is just about the box." Outside, the neighborhood sounded normal. Lawnmowers hummed. A child shouted something about a water balloon. The smell of grilled meat drifted faintly through the open window. Father's Day. For everyone else. Inside, the only thing louder than the silence was the box we weren't opening. The box hadn't moved in the last hour, but somehow its presence filled the entire living room. Marlene sat across from it like it might sprout legs and lunge. I stood a few feet away, my arms crossed tightly, eyes fixed on that anonymous square of cardboard like it had insulted me without saying a word. Then, a sound, not loud, not dramatic, just a soft shift, like paper settling, or something repositioning itself inside. I stepped closer. Marlene tensed. "Lowell." I raised a hand, but didn't answer. Slowly, I lowered myself until my ear was level with the box. Another sound. This one was faint but unmistakable, a brushing motion, like soft fabric against cardboard, or breath, or claws. I jerked upright, heart suddenly thudding in my chest like it had been kicked awake. "I heard it," I said quietly. Marlene was already backing up toward the hallway. "You're calling the police now." "It might be nothing," I said, though my voice betrayed the fact I no longer believed that. Even if it's nothing, it's a sick kind of joke. She wasn't wrong. The box hadn't just unsettled us, it had infected the room with a kind of invisible static, a low hum of dread. We were both trying not to say what we were really thinking. What if this wasn't a joke? We argued, gently at first. "I didn't want to call anyone over something that might make us look foolish," she said. "Foolish is better than dead." The absurdity of that sentence landed hard. Neither of us laughed. I exhaled. I don't want to give her the satisfaction. Marlene didn't have to ask who I meant. My thoughts traveled backward, years, really, but they stopped at a Thanksgiving when Roxanne handed me a wine bottle wrapped in glitter paper. The label read, "Emotional Manipulation, Merlot. Pairs well with guilt." She said it was a joke. Everyone laughed. I didn't. Another time, Christmas morning, she gave me a mug that said, "King of Guilt Trips." She was training Gideon to spot manipulation. I muttered aloud, the memory hitting like a slap. Marlene looked at me. "What?" She said it once, smiled while she said it, like it was charming. But I remember her tone. A sarcastic edge, not quite playful. She never liked how close I was with him. I stepped forward, suddenly angry, not boiling, not loud, just sharp. I bent down and peeled back the top flap of the box. Marlene gasped, but didn't stop me. Inside, resting on a thin sheet of crumpled paper, was something I hadn't seen in years. Mr. Brave, a cheap, plastic action figure with one bent arm and half a faded logo across its chest. It used to sit on the window ledge in my office, watching over bills and paper clips like some toy sentinel. It had been Gideon's favorite when he was 5. "Why?" I whispered, my throat tightening. Why this? Marlene moved slowly toward me, one hand over her mouth. The toy was worn, but not damaged, familiar, and yet its presence hit like a betrayal. Did they take it? When they visited last time? I asked. She didn't answer. My fingers trembled as I lifted the toy out of the box. Beneath it was another envelope, unmarked, sealed. I didn't open it, not yet, because the weight in my chest was already unbearable. Whoever sent this knew exactly what they were doing. They're trying to say I've been replaced, I said, voice brittle. Marlene shook her head slowly. Or that you're no longer safe. That struck deeper than I expected. Before I could say anything else, the box rustled again. I jumped back, knocking into the side table. Mr. Brave slipped from my fingers and hit the floor with a soft thud. I didn't look down. Instead, I stared out the front window. The driveway was empty now, but something about the day had shifted. I need to know who sent this, I said, my jaw tightening. And why now? Without waiting for Marlene's response, I turned toward my home office. There were records there, documents, files, and if this was what I feared, I needed to be ready. The air felt colder as I walked down the hallway, not just from the lake breeze slipping through the windows, but from something older, something buried in years of silence and second chances. This wasn't about a toy. It was about everything we hadn't said, and everything they had. The box rustled again, a subtle shift of air and cardboard that neither of us acknowledged out loud. Marlene sat at the edge of the couch, her knees pressed tightly together, fingers laced. I was still standing, arms crossed, watching it from a few feet away, like one might watch a sleeping dog whose temperament you don't fully trust. "I'm calling the police," she said again, but quieter this time. The edge in her voice had dulled into something raw, tired, worried. "We can't," I replied. "Not yet. You're afraid they'll think we're being dramatic? I'm afraid they'll think I've lost it." Her eyes found mine. "Lowell, this isn't about what they think. It's about what this is." She was right, but my pride was louder than logic. Something about the anonymity of it all, the box, the silence, the implications, made it feel less like a threat and more like a test, one I wasn't ready to fail. I took a breath, reached for the landline, and dialed. Travis picked up after 4 rings. "Hey, Dad, happy Father's Day. I was just about to call." His voice was too upbeat, too rehearsed. It felt like reading a script you've memorized but don't believe. "I figured I'd call first," I said. "Did you get some time to relax today?" "Oh, yeah, just hanging out with the kids. Roxanne made pancakes." There was a pause, then some background noise, a door closing, distant chatter. "I wanted to ask," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Did you happen to send something over here?" There was a hitch in his breath, almost too fast to catch. "Something? Like, what kind of something?" "That's the thing. I don't know. It just showed up. No name, no note." Another pause. Then I heard it. Not Travis, but Roxanne. A faint chuckle, barely there, but unmistakable. That particular brand of cold amusement I'd grown used to over the years. The kind that didn't laugh with you, but at you. Travis cleared his throat. "We didn't send anything. Maybe someone from the neighborhood?" His voice was strained now, the tone trying too hard to stay casual. Behind him, muffled words. Roxanne again. I couldn't make them out, but I didn't need to. Marlene walked over and pressed the speaker button without asking. She stood beside me, her arms crossed now too. "Well," I said, forcing a smile he couldn't see. "If anything else shows up, I'll let you know." "Yeah," he replied. "Yeah, sounds good. Talk soon, okay?" Click. Marlene stared at the phone for a beat, then said, She laughed. "Lowell." That wasn't surprise. That was satisfaction. I nodded, lips pressed tight. "She's in on it." The words hung in the room like smoke. I didn't want to admit it, Even now, I clung to the belief that Travis was still my son, the boy who used to climb into my lap and ask me to read Goodnight Moon 3 times in a row. But the man he'd become was different, more withdrawn, more cautious, more silent when silence protected the wrong people. "She's always had a grip on him," I said, "but I never thought that he'd let her do this." I shook my head. "Or that he'd help." I didn't answer. My thoughts churned back to the first time Roxanne came to our house, years ago, long before the grandkids. She was sharp then, witty in a way that could cut without drawing blood. I admired her intelligence. I didn't see the blade hidden behind the charm. Now, I wasn't sure who was orchestrating what, but I knew one thing. Travis was no longer just complicit through silence. Marlene sat back down. The box remained in the center of the coffee table, like a wounded animal between us. "If we don't call someone," she said. "What does that mean?" "It means," I rubbed my temple, "it means we're still pretending this isn't what it is." "And what is it?" "A message about who they think I am." Her expression softened, but not with comfort. "You're not imagining this. I know." I looked down at the toy still lying where I'd dropped it. Mr. Brave. His plastic arm bent at the elbow like he was trying to hold something back. I bent down slowly, picked him up again, then turned toward the hallway. "Where are you going?" I didn't answer right away. I walked into my study, opened the drawer under the window, and pulled out my old camcorder. The kind with the grainy audio and the tiny tapes. It still worked. I tested it every few months, even though I didn't know why. Now, I did. I booted up the old laptop in my office, the fan groaning to life like a reluctant witness. The light from the screen washed over the room's wooden shelves and faded carpet, casting long shadows over decades of documents. I hadn't opened the banking portal in months, not since setting most of it on autopay. Not since deciding to stop obsessing over every line item. But tonight, I needed answers. My hands moved slower now, stiffer than they used to be, but I knew the passwords by heart. The screen loaded, and with it came a familiar unease. The transaction history blinked into view. Groceries, utilities, charitable donations. Marlene and I still made every December. Then one charge jumped out, framed in sterile gray text. Reptilix.com. Overnight live package. $129.44. I blinked at it. The line item was from 3 weeks ago. The payment method was a secondary card, one I'd issued to Travis back when he was still in college, meant to be used for emergencies, books, groceries, a doctor's bill once. I'd never canceled it, just forgot it existed. Until now. I leaned back in my chair, the old leather creaking under my weight, and let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. They used my money, my account, my name, to send me a box without one. Marlene stood silently at the doorway, arms folded, lips pressed tight. She didn't ask what I'd found. She could see it in the way my shoulders sagged. "They used my card," I said flatly. "I paid for it." She didn't move, didn't speak, and that silence hit harder than any curse could. I turned back to the screen, needing something, anything, to fill the space between the weight in my chest and the truth staring back at me. A file folder on the desktop caught my eye. Photos back up all years. It was a redundant archive I'd created years ago, after an external hard drive had failed. I double-clicked it, a dull hope rising. Birthday parties, fishing trips, summer camps, one labeled Gideon's first soccer game. I opened it. Error, file not found. The screen flashed red, again and again. Each folder I tried was empty. I opened the log history. Deletion entries lined up, time-stamped, 3 weeks ago. The day after the inheritance fight. Dozens of photos, gone. No trace, no recycle bin. I didn't realize I was whispering until Marlene stepped further into the room. "What is it?" "They're missing. All of them." I turned the screen to face her. Every photo from the last 15 years, wiped. Her hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes stayed locked on the screen. "They're trying to erase me," I said, barely recognizing my own voice. Marlene didn't argue, didn't console. She crossed the room and picked up the small photo album we kept on the second shelf, the one that used to be fuller. She sat beside me, opened it, flipped gently through the pages. There were gaps, empty sleeves, whole sections torn out. She stopped on one. It was us at the county fair. Gideon, barely tall enough to reach my shoulder, had both arms wrapped around my neck. His grin was gummy and bright. My hand rested on his back, anchoring him. I stared at it until my throat closed. "They want to remind you how easy it is," she whispered, "to disappear." The sealed envelope from the box still sat beside the keyboard. I hadn't touched it yet, unwilling to know what came next, but now I slid my finger under the flap. Inside was a photo. It was the same image from the fair, but this one was burned around the edges. The corners scorched like someone had held it over a flame and stopped just short of destruction. On the back, scrawled in handwriting I didn't recognize, "This won't end in silence again." The words stung more than they should have, because they weren't wrong. I stood slowly, walked to the closet, and reached for the top shelf. My hand brushed against the worn leather folder marked Inheritance. Drafts. I pulled it down. This time, I didn't hesitate to open it. The house was still as stone. Not a whisper of wind moved through the pines outside, and even the clock on the kitchen wall seemed to tick more slowly than usual. I hadn't slept. I'd spent the night sitting in the home office, flipping through pages that no longer meant what they used to. The leather folder of inheritance drafts, something I once handled with care and pride, now felt like a ledger of everything I had miscalculated about family. At sunrise, I finally wandered into the kitchen. Marlene was already there, silent, making coffee like it was just another Monday. She looked older this morning, worn in a way that had nothing to do with age. She placed a mug in front of me without a word. Then, almost mechanically, she opened the drawer beside the fridge and pulled out an envelope. Her fingers hovered over it for a second, as if deciding whether to go through with whatever was already written in her eyes. Finally, she set it down next to the mug. "I wasn't going to show you this," she said, voice barely above a whisper. The envelope was creased, unsealed. Inside was a printed email. Subject, "Just stay out of it." My name wasn't on it, but the message was clear. Roxanne had written it 3 months ago. The date matched the week after our last inheritance discussion, when I'd refused, once again, to share what I didn't owe yet. The content read like a warning, or maybe a threat wrapped in civility. "Lowell needs to be taught a lesson. You don't need to interfere, just stay out of it." My eyes skimmed the message again and again, hoping it would change, that the words would somehow soften. They didn't. Marlene said nothing as I finished reading. The silence between us had shifted. It wasn't just discomfort now, it was history cracking under the weight of realization. "I thought if we just stayed quiet, it would pass," she said finally. I didn't want to believe she meant it, that they'd do something like this. The sound of her voice brought something sharp to the surface. I pushed the email aside and stood. "You read that and said nothing?" I asked. Not angry, just hollow. "You kept this?" Her hands shook slightly as she lifted her mug. What was I supposed to do? Force a confrontation? They're our family. I wanted to shout, but it wasn't that kind of anger. It was the quieter kind, the kind that scrapes at your spine because it comes with guilt. I should have known. I should have seen it coming, and I'd let her carry that alone. "I was scared," she said, "of losing them completely." "You think we haven't already?" The words hung there, heavy and irrefutable. I turned and walked to the office without another word. The camcorder was still in the drawer, an old relic from the days when Gideon used to stage puppet shows for the family, asking me to record every silly scene like it was Hollywood. I pulled it out, checked the battery, still charged. I placed it on the desk beside my laptop and opened a new folder. For Janessa, trust evidence. Marlene stood in the hallway, watching me, but didn't speak. I opened the bank portal again, took screenshots of the Reptilix charge, the timestamp, the delivery address. I cataloged every item from the financial folder, notes, email printouts, voicemail recordings. Then I opened the camcorder settings, activated the audio mode, and hit record. If they wanted to build a case against me or tear me down in front of Gideon, I would build something of my own, not revenge, just truth. Documented, filed, unmovable. I wrote one name on a yellow notepad beside me, Janessa Bloom, family attorney. The appointment was already scheduled. 10 o'clock. She'd done our estate planning years ago. Back then, it felt like a formality. Now, it felt like war prep. I opened the front window and let the salt air from the cove rush in. The sky was pale, the water calm. No more surprises. From here on, it was all receipts. I had the laptop open, folders arranged, camcorder set beside me like a silent witness. Janessa's call was in less than 20 minutes, and I wanted everything ready. Evidence, notes, receipts, all of it arranged like I was preparing for trial. Because, in a way, That's when the doorbell rang. I froze. Marlene glanced at me from the hallway, her expression darkening instantly. I didn't need to guess. I already knew. I stood slowly, walked to the foyer, and tapped the feed on the porch cam. Travis and Roxanne. No text, no call, no appointment, just there. My thumb hovered over the intercom button. Instead, I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. Roxanne didn't wait. "You didn't have to go through all this drama, Lowell," she said, arms crossed, voice clipped. Travis stood just behind her, hands in his pockets, eyes down. He hadn't even shaved. "You brought a snake," I said calmly, "and burned a photograph." "Forgive me if I mistook that for a conversation starter." Roxanne waved a hand, stepping onto the porch without being asked. "It was symbolic." "Of what?" "Of how you've made this family feel for years." Travis didn't speak. "You weren't supposed to take it so literally," she continued. "It was meant to open dialogue." "I would have preferred a phone call," I said, "or a visit without a threat attached." "You exaggerate." "I stayed in the doorway. I didn't move aside. I didn't invite them in. This wasn't going to be one of those sit down and talk it out kinds of scenes. Whatever this was, it belonged on the porch." Roxanne crossed her arms. "The toy, the note, it was metaphor. It was about letting you see how Gideon feels. He's 8, and he's anxious, withdrawn, because he knows something's off every time we visit here." My jaw tightened. "He was happy here." She smiled, thin and pitying. "You read what you wanted into that." I turned to Travis. "Do you really believe this is how family works now?" He blinked, opened his mouth, then closed it again. His hands curled in his jacket pockets. "We're just trying to survive, Dad." Something in that sentence hit me harder than I expected. It was so cowardly, so vague, and yet it rang true in the way someone tries to justify standing on the sidelines while someone else gets hurt. Roxanne reached into her bag and pulled out a manila envelope. "You'll want to read this before you call that lawyer." I didn't take it. She placed it on the porch railing. "It's nothing official," she added. "Yet, but it outlines some serious concerns." Concerns? Emotional neglect, withholding affection, toxic influence, rewriting inheritance terms without family transparency. She raised her eyebrows. "We're being gentle now, but if this becomes legal, so will we." Marlene had moved into view behind me, but she said nothing. She didn't need to. The air said enough. Roxanne straightened. "We can still keep this private, but if it goes public, I assure you, we'll be ready." "You already are," I said quietly. "You came with a weapon in an envelope." Roxanne smiled. "Just a precaution." I looked at Travis again. For a brief second, he looked at me, really looked. I loved you, I said softly, even when I didn't like you, even when you stayed silent. He blinked, but that was all. Roxanne turned toward the steps. We've said what we needed to say. Travis lingered, and then, without a word, followed her down the walkway. I didn't watch them leave. I closed the door, locked it, walked to the office. The email from Janessa was already in my inbox. Ready when you are. I hit reply. Let's move forward. I laid the pages out like a war map. Bank statements, email printouts, photos with scorched edges, Roxanne's email to Marlene, and the legal warning envelope she'd handed me on my own front porch. My desk, once a place of family budgeting and retirement plans, had become a battlefield. Marlene hovered by the doorway, unsure whether to speak or step away. Her silence wasn't distance, it was weight. A woman carrying too much for too long. I circled one phrase from Roxanne's letter with a red pen. Pattern of emotional control. They want to paint me as cruel, I said aloud, voice steady, but low. Let's give them clarity. My inbox pinged. Janessa Bloom. Her reply was measured but firm. No lawsuit yet. No retaliation. Just protection. Documentation. Strategy. A letter of legal concern to be delivered to Travis and Roxanne's attorney. Let them know we're not naive, she wrote, and we're not afraid. I clicked record on the camcorder and angled it slightly downward, catching my face but softening the glare. This wasn't for YouTube. This wasn't performative. It was legacy insurance. I'm not angry, I said to the lens. But I need the truth on record. I spoke slowly, carefully, about the toy, the financial manipulation, the photos wiped from my archive, and the way silence had long been my greatest mistake. For Gideon and Emma, I said at the end, one day, when someone tells you I was difficult, I want you to hear my voice, hear how it never rose, even when it should have. The footage finished uploading to the folder marked Trust Evidence, Janessa. Later. As I sifted through a drawer of old letters, my fingers brushed an envelope with my handwriting on it. I knew what it was before I pulled it out. The letter I'd written to Travis last year, the one I'd never sent. I unfolded it carefully and sat down. My voice cracked once as I read it aloud, the words spilling gently into the stillness of the room. I miss you, even when I see you. I know something changed. I don't know if I caused it or if time just took it from us. But I want to believe that good fathers make mistakes, too, and can still be forgiven. I looked up. Marlene was standing there, tears not falling, but resting quietly in the corners of her eyes. Do you want to add something? I asked. She nodded. She took the page, sat across from me, and picked up a pen. Travis, she wrote, you used to call me Mama. I want you to know, we noticed. We just stayed quiet longer than we should have. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Just after dusk, a knock broke the quiet. It wasn't frantic, it wasn't friendly, just firm. Sergeant Darnell stood on the porch, hands at his belt, posture alert. We received a report, he said calmly, about a potential live animal shipped without consent to this address. Mind if I step inside? I didn't argue. I stepped aside, gestured toward the box, now sealed again and resting in the corner of the dining room. He walked over, inspected it. I handed him the printouts, tracking information, payment history, even the reptile site invoice. You did the right thing not opening it, he said after a moment. I nodded, but something in me had already unraveled beyond reassurance. He asked a few more questions, filled out a brief incident form, and said, let me know if they contact you again. These things can escalate. They already have, I said. He didn't challenge that. He stepped back out onto the porch, nodded at Marlene, and left. I closed the door behind him slowly, then turned to Marlene, who sat at the edge of the dining room chair. Her hands knotted. I think I'm done waiting to be misunderstood. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Back in the office, I picked up the letter, now signed by both of us, and placed it carefully into a manila envelope. Across the top, in black ink, I wrote, "Trust termination. Final copy." The house was quieter than usual that morning, if that was even possible. The kind of quiet that didn't soothe, it pressed in. Marlene had risen before me, but said little. We moved like shadows in a routine that no longer fit. The envelope for Janessa had been mailed. That part was done. The next steps were out of my hands for now. I poured myself a cup of coffee I didn't want and opened my laptop. Notifications blinked along the corner of the screen. One caught my eye. Virtual Gallery, Rockport Elementary. I clicked it out of habit. The message was simple. Dear families and grandparents, we're excited to share this week's virtual art gallery from Miss Hendry's third grade class. Scrolling down, I saw Gideon's name. His drawing was titled The Scary Man. I clicked. The figure was blocky, drawn in thick marker lines, glasses, a white beard, a heavy frown. The eyes were blacked out entirely, and a large red X crossed over the face. No background. Just the man. I didn't blink, didn't speak. I called the school. A woman answered, Ms. Hendry, the teacher. I just saw a picture in the gallery, I said. It looks like me. Gideon drew it? There was a pause, then a careful reply. He did, but when I asked who the man was, he said he couldn't remember, just that it was someone who used to be nice. I thanked her, hung up. Marlene stepped into the room and paused. She looked at the screen, at my face. She didn't ask what had happened. She just sat beside me and placed her hand on my arm. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My voice would have cracked down the middle. Later. I checked the landline. One missed message. I played it. Gideon's voice came through, flat and hollow. Mom said you're busy right now. Maybe we can talk when you stop being angry. No, hi Grandpa, no laugh, no pauses, no warmth. I played it again and again. Not a single spontaneous word. No change in pitch. No giggle. No breath that wasn't rehearsed. She made him memorize it, I muttered. Marlene didn't disagree. I stood and walked into the hallway. Along the wall was a photo we'd taken years ago at the zoo. Me holding Gideon on my shoulders, his arms outstretched like wings, both of us laughing, real laughter, the kind that makes your ribs ache. I took the frame down and carried it back to the kitchen, set it on the table next to the laptop, called up the image of the drawing again. This is what silence costs, I said quietly. Marlene, leaning in the doorway, answered, and yet you stayed silent for so long. It wasn't cruel, it was true. I opened the old family album again, the one with empty sleeves and torn pages. I didn't feel angry this time, just tired. He doesn't hate me, I said. He just doesn't remember the version of me that loved him. Marlene sat beside me, one arm around my shoulder. I picked up both the photo and the drawing and gently slid them into a manila folder. On the label, I wrote, "For Gideon, when he's ready." Then I pulled a blank card from the drawer, wrote in slow, careful script, "You didn't do this. Gideon, you're still mine, always." I folded it, tucked it behind the photo, and sealed the envelope. The mailbox clicked shut behind me as I stood at the end of our gravel path, the late afternoon light casting long shadows across the road. The wind had picked up, gentle but insistent, bending the pines ever so slightly. In my hand was a thick white envelope, no return address, just my name typed in sharp, sterile font. I walked back up the porch steps slowly, each footfall louder than the last in my own ears. Inside, I set the envelope on the kitchen table, stared at it for a moment, then peeled it open with the edge of a butter knife. The contents were familiar, too familiar. Legal phrasing, allegations. Accusations written in the cold, sanitized language of bureaucracy, exhibits consistent patterns of controlling financial behavior, demonstrates long-term emotional intimidation tactics, displays signs of mental deterioration affecting family well-being. I sat down, hard, my breath shallow. The paper felt heavier than it should. "They're laying the foundation to erase me legally," I said. "More to the room than to anyone." Marlene stepped in from the hallway, reading my face before the paper. "They finally sent it?" she asked. I nodded, but couldn't lift my eyes. She didn't ask to read it. She just placed a cup of coffee beside my hand and whispered, "You look like you've just been handed your own obituary." I took the cup, let the warmth burn into my palms. Back in the office, I laid the documents beside the other ones I had collected. I started highlighting phrases, one by one, where they echoed the tone, even the wording, of emails and texts I'd saved. I remembered what Sergeant Darnell had asked, "Do you feel emotionally unsafe?" Now I understood. They were preloading the narrative, making me into a man who couldn't be trusted, who needed to be handled, quieted, removed. I reached for my old journal. The spine cracked when I opened it. The pages yellowed around the edges. I hadn't written in it in years. I didn't write for court. I didn't write for defense. I wrote a farewell. "There's no going back now," I began. "But there is going forward, with no illusions. I've spent a lifetime protecting people who could lie with a smile and ruin with a hug." The pen didn't shake. Later, as the sun dipped low, Marlene stepped into the office. Her face was drawn but resolute. "I need to tell you something," she said. I looked up. "I talked to Travis 2 weeks ago." My stomach dropped. She sat down slowly. "I didn't tell you because I thought maybe I could soften him. Stop this before it got worse." I didn't say anything. "I failed," she added, quietly. "And I'm sorry." "You tried," I said. "So did I." That was all. There was no need for more. We had both been playing a game without knowing the rules. I picked up the phone and called Janessa. She answered on the second ring. "They escalated," I said. "I assumed they would," she replied. "It means they're afraid. Now we move. We file the restraining order. We send formal notification of estate protection." I opened the fireproof cabinet and removed the sealed envelope labeled Inheritance Draft. Sitting at the desk, I added a single line in blue ink. "Effective immediately. All future access to my estate is hereby revoked. This revision replaces all prior versions." I signed and dated it. Then, for a moment, I stared at the fireplace. I didn't burn it. Not yet. Instead, I sealed the document again, marked the envelope, "Final Revision," witnessed, and placed it gently inside the safe. Outside, the wind began to whistle, rattling the same porch where the box had first arrived. The day had grown colder, and the house creaked with a knowing kind of quiet. But this time, the silence didn't belong to them. It belonged to me. The fog rolled in thick from the bay that morning, wrapping the porch in a silence that felt older than the house itself. I brewed coffee like always, dark, bitter, grounding, and stood by the window watching the mist settle into the lawn's corners. The world looked quiet, but inside, the quiet had a pulse. Marlene was at the dining table, her hands carefully unwrapping a small box. It wasn't one I'd seen before. "What's that?" I asked. She turned it toward me. Inside was a bottle of perfume, simple, elegant, expensive-looking. A card lay tucked underneath, handwritten in the looped precision I'd come to know too well. "For all you've endured, thank you, Roxanne." I stared at the card, then the bottle, then back at Marlene. "She sent you perfume," I said. "She sent me a predator." Marlene didn't laugh, didn't smile. She folded the note slowly and set it aside like something too fragile to throw away, too false to keep close. Later, in the office, I powered on the hard drive again. My intent was to finalize the video archive Janessa had asked me to compile. A clean record of everything: birthdays, holidays, family milestones, for the trust record. But entire folders were gone. Father's Day 2016, Gideon's first catch, Christmas morning, 4 years ago. Vanished. I checked the activity log. 2 weeks ago, accessed via a device linked to Travis's email. I said it aloud this time. They're not just severing ties. They're erasing them. Marlene, standing quietly at the doorframe, didn't ask for details. She just walked away, slowly, her shoulders heavier than before. I called Janessa. She answered with calm precision, as always. "Restraining orders in place," she said. "Filed and acknowledged. No contest yet. Their counsel has gone silent." "Silence is their next move," I said. "They're hoping I'll break first." "They're hoping you'll reverse before it's final," she replied. "They should know me better by now." After the call, I slipped an old DVD into the player, one of the few videos that hadn't been tampered with. It was a simple scene, me and Gideon on the dock, holding rods, his voice bubbling with excitement, his small hands gripping the reel, his giggle bouncing off the water. I burned a copy to disk. Labeled it in black ink, "For Gideon. Fishing. Age 5. Then I walked to the local post office, the disc sealed in a padded envelope addressed in my best cursive. The clerk smiled at me from behind the counter. "Registered or not?" "Registered," I said. "I want to know it reaches him, even if no one shows it to him yet." He nodded, printed the tracking slip, and handed me the receipt. On the way home, the fog had lifted slightly, but the stillness remained. Back in the living room, I saw the perfume bottle sitting neatly on the mantel, catching the weak sunlight through the window. "You kept it," I said. Marlene sat in the armchair nearby. "Because even lies leave a scent." I sat beside her, our shoulders nearly touching, but not quite. We didn't talk, not because there was nothing to say, but because everything had already been said, in too many ways, for too many years. The clock ticked steadily above the fireplace. Later that evening, I opened my journal. I didn't write much, just one line. "Forgiveness without return is the hardest kind, but it's the only kind I have left to give." I tore the page carefully and slid it into the folder marked Legacy. Then I turned off the light in the office. As I walked down the hallway, the faint scent of Marlene's perfume followed behind me, soft as a memory that wouldn't leave, and maybe shouldn't. The courthouse smelled of varnished wood and old paper. Janessa met us outside just before 9. She wore a calm expression that gave away nothing, but when she nodded toward the manila folder in her hand, I knew. Inside the courtroom, it was quiet. No cameras, no audience. Just a judge with silver-rimmed glasses and the decency to read slowly. Out loud. Travis and Roxanne didn't show. The protection order was signed within minutes. No contest, no appeal, no last-minute speech. Just a thick stamp and a finality that settled into my bones. "The last line drawn," I murmured. Janessa handed me a sealed packet, thicker than most. "Your updated will and the educational trust. It's final, enforceable, and exclusive to your grandchildren now," she said. The packet felt heavier than any judgment. Later that day, back home, I walked into the office and opened the safe. I placed the packet inside, behind the labeled folder, "For Emma Gideon, only." Then I sat at my desk and pulled out a clean sheet of paper. "Dear Emma, dear Gideon, I didn't leave you this to spoil you. I left you clarity. Someday, you'll read things that make me sound angry, or unfair, or wrong. But know this, everything I did in these last few months was to leave you a clean path, one without guilt, one without noise. Use it better than your parents did." I signed it simply. Grandpa Lowell. At dusk, there was a knock on the door. Sergeant Darnell. "Sorry to drop by late," he said, handing me an envelope. "Something new?" He nodded. "We were required to log attempted financial access." Inside the report were two names, Travis and Roxanne. Travis had submitted a claim of power of attorney 3 weeks ago. Roxanne had emailed the bank days later, questioning my mental clarity and requesting a review of account access. "They didn't just want my money," I said, voice flat. "They wanted to declare me gone while I was still breathing." Darnell said nothing, just pressed his lips and gave a small nod. That evening, I recorded one last video. No papers in front of me, no folder titles, just my face, lit by the desk lamp. My name is Lowell Carr. I'm 78, and I am not confused. I paused. Forgiveness isn't weakness, but boundaries are how love survives disappointment. Then I showed the packet on camera. This trust isn't to punish, it's to protect. Any attempt to manipulate or interfere will remove the children from eligibility permanently. It's not revenge, it's consequence. I sent the clip, along with the updated trust terms, to Travis and Roxanne's attorney. Marlene leaned against the doorframe. You think they'll understand the message? Maybe not, I said, but their lawyer will. She raised an eyebrow. I added, let's see how long manipulation survives without money. After dinner, we sat out back. The porch creaked softly beneath us, the bay breeze carrying the faintest scent of pine and salt. Do you think they'll hate you for it someday? Marlene asked. I watched the last orange streaks of daylight slide beneath the horizon. Maybe, I said. But I'm not raising them anymore. I'm raising what they'll remember. Then I stood and walked inside. I picked up the old photo frame from the hallway drawer, the one of me and Gideon, fishing, grinning like fools. I replaced it on the wall. Below it, I hung a new plaque, freshly carved. It read, "Some families grow stronger at the root. Others must be pruned to bloom." The house was quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet as before. It was earned. And as I turned off the lights in the hallway, a final thought settled in. One I knew too many men my age still needed to hear. So I said it. Not for Marlene, not for Travis, but for anyone still listening. If you're over 60 and think it's too late to draw a line, it's not love them, but love yourself enough to stop when it turns into sacrifice without meaning.